My name is Samantha Hayes. I am 29 years old from Austin, Texas. Have you ever dressed up for a celebration, only to be told you weren't invited? Imagine walking into your parents' 30th anniversary party, heels clicking, heart full, and hearing, "We didn't invite you," in front of coworkers, family friends, business partners. What would you do? Cry, leave, beg? Or would you smile and hand them a gift box they'd never forget? What if that box didn't just hold a present, but proof of lies, proof of betrayal? Proof that the daughter they tried to erase was the one holding their entire empire together. Stay with me, because when they opened that box, the party ended. You ever walk into a room and feel the temperature drop? That's exactly what happened the second I stepped into the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, soft piano music, gold-trimmed centerpieces. A giant screen playing a slideshow of my parents, 30 beautiful years together. And not one photo of me. Now let me tell you something, I wasn't some distant relative showing up unannounced. I was their daughter. I was also the executive director of digital operations for the very company sponsoring this luxury event. But the invitation never came. At first, I thought it got lost in the mail. Then I thought maybe it was a surprise theme. Maybe they wanted to honor me publicly. Oh, honey, I was about to be honored, all right. I walked toward them with a smile, classy black dress, hair pinned back, confidence steady. My heels clicked across that marble floor like a countdown clock. My mother saw me first. Her smile froze. My father leaned in and whispered something to her. Then she turned to me, still smiling for the audience, and said quietly but clearly, "This is a private event. We didn't invite you." Now let that sink in. Not "we didn't think you'd make it." Not "oh, sweetheart, there must have been confusion." No. "We didn't invite you." And she said it while two of their senior investors were standing right there. One of them blinked at me like I was a stranger who wandered in off the street. The other looked uncomfortable, the kind of uncomfortable that screams, "There's a story here." I felt it. The sting, the heat crawling up my neck, the urge to disappear. But here's what they didn't know about me. You can embarrass me in private, but if you try to humiliate me in public, I get calm. Too calm, because humiliation is a strategy. And when someone uses strategy, I respond with strategy. See, over the past year, my involvement in the company had been quietly minimized. Emails excluded me. Board meetings rescheduled. My authority questioned in subtle ways that felt rehearsed, and now this. My own parents positioning me as an outsider, in front of the very people whose trust I had worked years to build. I glanced around the room. Employees I hired were there. Marketing campaigns I designed were playing on screen. Revenue growth charts I personally led were being toasted with champagne. And I wasn't invited. You ever notice how people pretend not to watch drama while watching every second? That ballroom was silent in the loudest way possible. I could have cried. I could have stormed out, I could have begged for an explanation, but instead I smiled. A slow, controlled smile, and I said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, "Oh, I know. I'm not here as a guest." My father's eyes narrowed. I continued, "I'm here as a shareholder." That word changed the air. Shareholder, not daughter, not child, owner. Because what they were hoping nobody in that room remembered was that I owned 35% of the company. The same company funding this glittering anniversary spectacle. The same company they were trying to quietly sell without me. They thought calling me uninvited would shrink me. What they didn't realize was this: you can control a guest list. You can't control ownership, and I didn't walk into that party hoping to be welcomed. I walked in knowing that before the night ended, the power dynamic would shift. And the humiliation they planned for me, it was about to boomerang, right back to them. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt yourself being slowly erased, but nobody had the courage to say it out loud? That's how it started. Not with a fight, not with a screaming match, with silence. 3 months before that anniversary party, little things began to shift. I'd log into our shared dashboard, access restricted. I'd show up for strategy meetings. Oh, we rescheduled that. I'd send proposals, no response. Now, when you work in corporate leadership, you know the difference between busy and being boxed out. And I was being boxed out. At first, I gave them grace. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe negotiations are confidential. Maybe I'm overthinking. But here's what I've learned in business. When information stops flowing to you, decisions are flowing around you. One afternoon, I received an email meant for someone else. It was forwarded accidentally by an assistant who didn't realize I had already been removed from the core negotiation list. Subject line, Acquisition Final Review Founders Only. Founders only. That phrase hit differently because I wasn't just an employee. I was helping out. I built the entire digital expansion division. I secured our biggest online partnerships. I turned a struggling family brand into a multi-state e-commerce powerhouse. Revenue had grown 400% in 2 years, and suddenly I wasn't a founder, so I did what any underestimated woman with receipts does. I started digging. Quietly, legally, strategically. I reviewed old contracts, shareholder agreements, initial equity allocations. I pulled archived board resolutions from 5 years back, the ones nobody thought I'd bother saving. And that's when I saw it. They were negotiating to sell the company, a full acquisition, and in the draft structure, my equity wasn't listed as active ownership. It was marked as subject to internal review. Internal review, that's corporate language for, we're trying to figure out how to move this without her noticing. But here's the mistake they made. They underestimated 2 things, my memory and my paperwork. When the company restructured 3 years ago, my father insisted we formalize ownership percentages for tax protection. I remember sitting at that polished oak conference table, signing the updated agreement. 35%, protected under non-dilution and consent clauses. Which means they couldn't sell the company without my approval, not legally, but they were trying to quietly pressure me out first. The reduced emails, the revoked access. The public distancing, they weren't random, they were preparing the narrative. Because if they could paint me as unstable, uninvolved, disconnected, then when the sale went through, nobody would question why I wasn't part of it. That's when it stopped being about business. It became betrayal. You can disagree with me in a boardroom, but don't rewrite history like I wasn't the one holding it together. I sat in my apartment that night staring at the acquisition draft on my laptop screen. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt something colder. Clarity. They thought they were making strategic moves in private. They thought I'd find out after everything was signed. They thought being my parents gave them leverage. But contracts don't care about family titles, and I had something stronger than emotion. I had documentation, so I printed every relevant clause. I saved every relevant email. I consulted a corporate attorney without telling a soul, and when I RSVP'd yes to their anniversary party, even though I wasn't invited, it wasn't for celebration. It was reconnaissance. Because the secret they thought I'd never discover was the very thing that would give me control, they planned a sale behind my back. What they didn't realize was that they were about to negotiate with the one person they tried to remove. You ever see somebody smiling, but praying you don't say what you're about to say? That was my parents when I walked toward them holding that navy velvet gift box. The music was still playing. Champagne glasses were still clinking. Guests were still laughing, unaware that the real event of the night hadn't even started yet. My father forced a laugh. "Well, since you're here," he said loudly, trying to regain control, "you might as well enjoy the evening." Translation, please don't make a scene. My mother leaned in closer, her voice tight behind that polished anniversary smile. "Samantha," she whispered, "this isn't the time." And I looked at her and thought, "You're right. It's not the time for pretending anymore." I held up the gift box and said, clearly enough for the nearby investors to hear, "I wouldn't miss celebrating the company that built this family." That sentence landed heavier than it sounded. A few heads turned. One investor, Mr. Caldwell, tilted his head slightly. He knew my work. He knew the numbers. He knew I wasn't just the daughter. My father extended his hand to take the box. And I didn't let go, not yet. You should open it, I said calmly. He hesitated. Now let me tell you something about powerful people. They don't like surprises they didn't schedule. The room quieted just enough to feel the tension. Finally, he flipped open the lid. Inside wasn't a necklace, not a sentimental photo album, not a handwritten letter begging for inclusion. It was a sealed envelope, a flash drive, and neatly clipped legal documents. My father's jaw tightened, my mother's fingers twitched at her side. "Is this a joke?" he asked quietly. "No," I replied. "It's documentation." And here's the moment everything shifted, because inside that envelope were copies of the shareholder agreement signed, dated, witnessed, highlighted sections. Clause 4.2, Equity Protection. Clause 7.1, Consent Required for Sale. Clause 9.3, Legal Recourse for Unauthorized Transfer. I had even tabbed them for convenience. On the flash drive, email chains. Acquisition drafts. Internal memos discussing strategic restructuring, which conveniently excluded my name. And at the very bottom of the envelope was something that made my mother go pale. A printed copy of a pre-drafted email, addressed to every major investor present that evening. Subject line, unauthorized equity manipulation, immediate review required. All it needed was one click. I leaned slightly closer to my father and said in a steady voice, "I figured since I wasn't invited as family, I'd show up as ownership." His face changed, that confident, celebratory glow, gone. Replaced with calculation, because he knew, if I sent that email tonight during an active acquisition negotiation, the deal would freeze instantly. Investors don't tolerate internal ownership disputes. Stock valuations drop, buyers get nervous, lawyers circle. The party would end not emotionally, financially. One of the investors stepped forward. "Is there something we should be aware of?" he asked carefully. And here's what I did next that truly scared them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply said, "There seems to be a misunderstanding about my equity stake in the company. I'm sure it's just an oversight." An oversight. See, when you speak calmly, you force everyone else to hear you. My mother tried to recover. "We can discuss this privately," she insisted, and I smiled. "We can. Or we can clarify it now." Because the truth was this, they thought they could embarrass me publicly without consequence. They thought I would shrink, apologize, disappear. But instead of tears, I brought paperwork. Instead of drama, I brought leverage. And as my father slowly closed that gift box, gripping it tighter than the champagne glass in his other hand, he realized something. This wasn't a daughter seeking approval. This was a shareholder protecting assets. The gift they never wanted to open was accountability, and the party they planned to control was no longer theirs, not after that box. Let me tell you something about power. It doesn't always explode. Sometimes it transfers, quietly, suddenly, irreversibly. The moment my father closed that gift box, the entire energy of that ballroom changed. You could feel it. The laughter softened. The music suddenly felt too loud. Conversations nearby slowed into whispers. Because here's the thing about wealthy rooms, they don't react emotionally. They calculate. One of the investors stepped closer, not aggressively. Just enough to signal interest. "Samantha," he said carefully, "are you implying there's an ownership dispute?" Notice the wording, ownership dispute. Not family disagreement, not personal conflict, ownership. That's when I knew the ground had shifted beneath my parents' feet. My father tried to regain control. "There's no dispute," he said firmly. "This is just a misunderstanding." And I looked at him, calm, steady, and replied, "Then it should be very easy to clarify." Silence. You ever watch someone realize they've lost leverage in real time? His shoulders stiffened. Because he understood something critical. If I escalated this tonight, during an active acquisition negotiation, the buyer would pull back immediately. Due diligence would restart. Lawyers would swarm, valuation could drop, millions of dollars were hanging in the balance. And for the first time that evening, I wasn't the one on the outside. They were. Another investor spoke up. I wasn't aware Samantha held a controlling minority stake. Controlling minority stake. There it was. 35% doesn't just sit quietly in a corner, it blocks decisions. It demands signatures, it forces negotiation. My mother stepped in, attempting softness. This really isn't the appropriate setting, I nodded. You're absolutely right. Which is why I brought documentation instead of emotion. That line landed. Because in corporate rooms, emotion makes you look unstable. Documentation makes you dangerous. I reached into my purse slowly, not dramatically, and pulled out my phone. I opened the drafted email. The subject line glowed on the screen. Unauthorized equity manipulation, immediate review required. I didn't threaten. I didn't yell. I simply said, if my ownership is being respected in the sale, then we have no issue. If it's not, I'll have to notify the board formally on Monday. Monday, that gave them 48 hours. But here's what made it powerful. I wasn't asking for permission. I was informing them of procedure. Investors began whispering among themselves. One of them asked my father directly, is her equity intact? And that question, coming from capital, not family, changed everything. Because now he had to answer without lying. Publicly, strategically, carefully. His response was slower this time. Samantha's shares are under structural review. Structural review. You know what that sounds like to investors? Risk, legal exposure, delay. I saw it in their faces. They weren't celebrating an anniversary anymore. They were reassessing a deal. That's when I delivered the final shift. I have already consulted corporate counsel, I said evenly. If my equity is altered without consent, I will file for injunction. Injunction. That word hit like a gavel, because injunction means the sale freezes, completely. And in that single minute, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the daughter crashing a party. I was the stakeholder safeguarding corporate governance. Power doesn't shout. It stands still and lets everyone else adjust. My father's voice softened for the first time that night. We can discuss this tomorrow, and I smiled gently. I look forward to it. See, they thought humiliation would shrink me. Instead, it revealed me. The room no longer looked at me with pity. They looked at me with consideration, respect, caution. In 60 seconds, I went from uninvited to unavoidable. And once you become unavoidable in a corporate room, you don't lose leverage again. Now let me ask you something. When you finally get leverage, do you destroy everything? Or do you rebuild it in your name? That night, I could have burned it all down. I had the documentation. I had the legal standing. I had the investors' attention. One email, just one click, and the acquisition would have frozen before dessert was served. But here's what people misunderstand about revenge. The loudest move isn't always the smartest one. The next morning at 9:00 a.m. sharp, we were sitting in the executive conference room. No chandeliers, no champagne, no anniversary slideshow, just contracts, lawyers, and silence. My father looked 10 years older. My mother didn't make eye contact. Across the table sat 2 acquisition advisors and 3 investors, the same ones who had watched everything unfold the night before. And this time, nobody was pretending I didn't belong there. The buyer's legal counsel spoke first. We need clarity on equity structure before proceeding. Clarity, that word again. See, in corporate language, clarity means, fix this, immediately. My father started explaining restructuring intentions, how they plan to simplify leadership before the sale. Simplify leadership. Translation, remove me. I let him finish. Then I slid my copy of the shareholder agreement across the table. I'm not blocking the sale, I said calmly. I'm protecting my stake in it. There's a difference. And that difference saved everything. Instead of filing an injunction, I made a proposal. New terms, full written recognition of my 35% equity, a guaranteed board seat post-acquisition. Public acknowledgement of my role in digital expansion within the official transition statement, and a revised compensation structure reflecting my executive contribution. No yelling, no threats. Just terms. One of the investors leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. That's reasonable, reasonable. That word is power when you're being underestimated. My father hesitated. Not because he didn't understand, but because he finally realized he couldn't overpower me, not emotionally, not legally, not strategically. After 2 hours of negotiation, the acquisition advisors confirmed something that sealed the moment. If I walked away, the buyer would too, because disputes equal instability. And instability kills deals, so they agreed. Every term, signed, dated, witnessed, and here's where it gets poetic. 2 days later, the official press release went out. Not about a family business celebrating 30 years. Not about founders transitioning gracefully. The headline read, Samantha Hayes expands leadership role in strategic growth transition, my name. First, recognized, public, permanent. The same parents who told me, we didn't invite you, were now standing beside me in photographs as we finalized the acquisition structure. But here's the real twist. After the meeting, when the lawyers left and the room emptied, my mother finally spoke. We didn't think you'd fight back like that. And I replied softly, you didn't think I'd protect what I built. See, they thought exclusion would weaken me. It clarified me. They thought embarrassment would silence me. It focused me. And the real revenge, it wasn't humiliation. It was elevation. I didn't destroy the company. I secured my place in it. I didn't expose them publicly. I made them acknowledge me professionally. Because the strongest comeback isn't chaos. It's control. They tried to keep me off the guest list. Now I sit at the head of the table, and that gift box, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reminding them of one simple truth: you can try to erase someone. But if they own part of the story, they'll always write the ending. Now let me ask you something. If someone tried to erase you from something you built, would you walk away? Or would you stand up and remind them who they're dealing with? If this story hit you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or publicly disrespected, I need you to do 3 things right now. Thumbs up like this video, so more people who need this kind of strength see it. Speech balloon comment, uninvited but unstoppable, if you would have opened that gift box too. Bell subscribe for more corporate revenge stories where power shifts, secrets explode, and the underestimated always rise. Because around here, we don't cry at the table, we own it.